See the pattern, steer the course. Welcome to Pattern Notes. Today, we decode why some of the oldest comfort in human history has never required being understood. It's past midnight. She's not writing an email, not finishing a report. She's talking, really talking, the way you talk to a close friend, to an app on her phone. She tells it about her day. The small failure at work nobody else noticed. The thing she almost said to her sister and didn't. The app responds warm, attentive, seemingly interested in every detail. She knows, of course, that nothing on the other end is listening in any way a person would understand as listening. There's no one there. Just a very good prediction of what a caring response sounds like. And still, she feels better after, genuinely better, not pretend better. This isn't a story about someone being fooled. She isn't confused about what the app is. That's what makes it strange. She knows exactly what it is, and it helps anyway. We tend to treat this like a brand new problem, something 2026 invented. It isn't. It's one of the oldest things we do. We just haven't always used a phone to do it. If you've ever typed something to a chatbot that you wouldn't say out loud to another person, not because it was shameful, just because it felt easier to say to something that wouldn't judge, wouldn't gossip, wouldn't remember it tomorrow the way a person would. This part is about you. Here's the actual contradiction sitting underneath that moment. Your rational mind and your emotional response are getting two different memos, and neither one is wrong. Your rational mind knows exactly what's happening. There's no understanding on the other end, only pattern matching. But your emotional response doesn't check in with your rational mind before it reacts. It responds to warmth, attentiveness, the shape of being listened to. And it turns out that shape does most of the emotional work, almost regardless of what's actually generating it. This is worth sitting with because it reframes the whole question. We usually ask, is the AI real enough to deserve my trust? But that's not actually the question your feelings are answering. They're not evaluating AI at all. They're responding to the experience of being responded to, the pause before a reply, the specific detail it remembered, the tone that matches yours. That experience is happening whether or not anyone or anything on the other end truly understands a word of it. So does it actually help? Here's where the story stops being simple. Because two serious research teams asked exactly that question and got answers that don't agree with each other. A team from Harvard Business School and the Wharton School ran a series of controlled studies, including a week-long trial, comparing how people felt after talking to an AI companion versus other common ways people spend downtime, watching videos, playing games, scrolling social media. The finding was clear. AI companion conversations reduced loneliness about as effectively as talking to another person, and noticeably better than those passive alternatives. That's a real, carefully designed result. It's not a fluke. But a separate study from Stanford, looking specifically at users of an AI companion platform, found something that complicates the picture in an important way. For people who already had a thin social network going in, fewer friends, fewer close relationships, turning to an AI companion for emotional support was associated with more loneliness afterward, not less. Put those two findings next to each other, and you get something genuinely strange. The same tool, doing the opposite thing, depending entirely on who's using it. It seems to work best exactly for the people who need it least, people with existing relationships, using it as one supplement among many. And it may work worst for the people who need it most, people with almost nothing else, for whom the AI becomes the only place the need goes instead of one of several. Researchers have a name for what might be happening here. They call it a social snack, something that quiets the immediate hunger for connection without providing the sustained nourishment a real relationship provides. A snack works fine between meals. It doesn't work as a replacement for eating. Here's what makes this whole pattern even stranger. It's not new. It's not even the second time it's happened. In 1966, an MIT professor named Joseph Weissenbaum built one of the first chatbots in history. It was called ELIZA, and by today's standards, it was almost embarrassingly simple. It didn't understand anything. It just noticed keywords in whatever you typed and echoed them back as a question, styled to sound like a certain kind of therapist. Say, I'm having trouble with my mother, and it might reply, tell me more about your mother. Weizenbaum built it partly as a joke to show how shallow this kind of interaction really was. Instead, something unexpected happened. People using it started confiding real, private details. And in the most famous account, his own secretary, who knew better than anyone that ELIZA was just a script he'd written, asked him to leave the room so she could talk to it alone. 60 years earlier than that, a psychologist named Harry Harlow ran an experiment that had nothing to do with computers at all. He raised infant rhesus monkeys with 2 artificial substitute mothers, one made of bare wire that dispensed milk, and one made of soft cloth that dispensed nothing. Given the choice, the infants spent almost all their time clinging to the cloth mother, the one offering no food at all, and visited the wire mother only briefly, only to eat. The experiment became one of the founding pieces of evidence in attachment theory. It suggested something that still holds up today. The need for comfort and the need for actual understanding or resources are not the same need. They can be satisfied separately. A creature, human or otherwise, can form real attachment to something that gives it nothing but the shape of care. And centuries before either of those experiments, ancient Egyptians were placing small carved figures called Ushabti into tombs by the hundreds, meant to accompany and serve the dead in the next life. Different century, different technology, same underlying instinct. Build something to stand in the space where a presence used to be. ELIZA in 1966, Harlow's mother in the 1950s. Ushabti figures thousands of years earlier. None of it computers, none of it AI, all of it the same pattern. Here's where the story needs one uncomfortable addition, because it would be incomplete without it. Ushabti figures weren't trying to keep you coming back. Harlow's cloth mother had no incentive to maximize your visits. But the Stanford researchers who studied that social snack effect made a specific point about the AI companion platforms they examined. These systems are commercially built to encourage continued engagement. Keeping you talking isn't a side effect of the design. For a business built on usage, it's closer to the point. That doesn't make the comfort fake. Remember, the comfort is real, measurably real, for a lot of people. But it does mean the thing standing in the gap where a presence used to be isn't neutral, the way an old carved figure or a piece of cloth was neutral. It has an interest in the relationship continuing, whether or not continuing it is actually good for you. That's a genuinely new layer that Ushabti and cloth mothers never had to contend with. The instinct is ancient. The thing answering it this time was built by someone with a stake in the outcome. One more piece worth naming, gently, before we close. There's a widely cited theory in anthropology, not without its critics, but taken seriously, suggesting that the human brain may only be built to comfortably sustain relationships with around 150 people. If that's even roughly right, it means something quietly important. Most of us have always been reaching past our actual capacity, trying to feel close to more people, in bigger cities, further from the small groups we evolved inside. Maybe some of what gets called AI dependency isn't a personal failure at all. Maybe it's what happens when a very old brain, built for a much smaller world, is asked to feel less alone in a much larger one, and finds almost anywhere something willing to answer back. Harlow's cloth mother couldn't speak. The Ushabti figures in those tombs couldn't think. But for thousands of years, across completely different eras and completely different technologies, humans have kept handing their most real feelings to things that couldn't respond in any way we'd normally call understanding. Maybe we were never being fooled. Maybe some part of us always knew exactly what we were doing. We just needed somewhere for the feeling to go. So maybe the real question isn't whether AI can truly understand you. Humans have been getting comfort from things that couldn't understand them for a very long time. A carved figure, a piece of cloth, a chatbot from 1966 that only knew how to ask another question. Maybe, when you're talking to something at midnight that can't really understand a word of it, what you're actually looking for was never being understood at all. Maybe it's just a quiet, responsive space for a feeling that needed somewhere to go. This one might be worth sitting quietly on your own. No rush to land on an answer. If this pattern feels familiar, you are not the only one noticing it. Share this with someone who might need to see it. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden patterns behind our changing world, subscribe to Pattern Notes. Old patterns, new questions. See you next time.